Good afternoon. I'm Ken Watkins, Mayor, City of Kingman. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a work session meeting of the City Council. All work session items listed are for discussion only. No action can or will be taken. The primary purpose of work session meetings is to provide the City Council with the opportunity for in-depth discussion and study of specific subjects. Public comment is not provided for on the agenda and may be made only as approved by consensus of the council. In appropriate circumstances, a brief presentation may be permitted by a member of the public or another interested party on an agenda item if invited by the mayor or city manager to do so. The mayor may limit or end the time for such presentations. We'll turn some time over to our city clerk, Annie Meredith, for Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call. You want to do that?
Sure.
Okay, please.
Mayor Watkins.
Here.
Vice Mayor Samily.
Here.
Councilmember Eric. Councilmember Savage is excused. Councilmember Scott Staley is excused. Councilmember Walker. Here. Councilmember Ward. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I've asked a member of our Planning and Zoning Commission to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. If we could all stand for that. Kevin Sarkeesian, if you'd lead us, please. Once again, thanks for everybody being here and those who might be viewing via our YouTube channel. On our agenda, we have one item, City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission joint work session on the City of Kingman General Plan 2040. The City of Kingman Development Services Division is working with consultant Jessica Sarkeesian of Upfront Planning and Entitlements, LLC, on the General Plan 2040 update. One of the requirements of the process is to have a work session with the City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission. And with that, we will turn some time over to Sean Osterman from our Planning and Zoning Department.
Mayor Watkins.
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the Planning and Zoning Commissioners that are with us today.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Nope, that's okay. We have Commissioner Blair, Commissioner Sarkeesian, Commissioner Goss is on Zoom, as well as Commissioner Swap.
Great. Thank you, Annie, for doing that. And we appreciate you, once again, your commission members that are here and all the work that you do in helping guide our city on the Planning and Zoning Commission. And of course, Councilor Walker is the city liaison to that. So we're glad you're here, Keith, too. I know you anyway. I knew you would be. So then we can turn some time over to Sean then.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Today, essentially, we're here to kind of go over with the City Council as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission, kind of the preliminary of where we're at, what we've done, why we've done it with the general plan on the update. So Jessica Sarkeesian here next to me, she is going to go in a lot more in depth into all of that information for you. So thank you. Jessica?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mayor and Commissioners and Council members. Thank you guys for attending. I really appreciate this because we're going to be coming before you guys in April, before the Commission, and then we'll come before the Council in May as well. So it's really important that, and we're in the middle of our 60-day review right now, so we want to make sure that you guys are aware of it and understand and have it. If you have any questions or concerns, we want to be able to get in front of them before those hearings and address them and make any changes at that time as well. So Sean's bringing up the PowerPoint. Oh, it's hidden. It's just that one.
That one, right?
No, close enough. All right, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go through this PowerPoint, and if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. I'll try to go into as much detail. There's a lot of information here. We're going over all of the chapters as well as survey responses to help you give understanding of why we did certain things. And we're also going over what the changes are. So if you're not aware, the purpose of the general plan, each municipality must adopt a general plan. And so you guys are coming up for your 10-year update. I'm sure many of you have been a part of it before in the past, but it consists of a statement of community goals and development policies. And there's text and everything, and objectives, principles, standards, and proposals in there. And within that, because it's a state statute, you're required, because of your population size, to have a land use plan, a circulation element, a growth area element, open space element, environmental planning, cost of development, and water resources. And then it's good for 10 years. And it talks about minor and major amendments and the differences between them. And this is not zoning, this is before zoning. So it's a higher level thing. It does not change anybody's property, what they can or can't do. It just has a goal for the future and then guides you, the council, commission, and staff as for when projects do come in, does it meet the goals of what you guys are looking to do in the future. So the existing general plan was adopted in 2014 and is Kingman 2030. Here is the existing land use. It had 7 existing elements, which was missing water, which is a required element, so that is being added in. There were only 2 maps at the time, which were land use and growth areas, and so we are adding to that map. And then it needed updating for policies and guidelines. We didn't talk really into energy, building types, changes in land patterns, and circulation opportunities that you guys have had since then. So this new plan is going to go into all those other items. So the timeline was started in September, October of last year. And here's our project timeline currently. We can see we're in the yellow area. We're with the work session. We're still in the middle of our 60-day. The 60-day will end on April 12th. And then that's the 60-day public comment period. So there is a draft online that has been there since February. And the public, as well as other agencies and municipalities, are able to view it and make any comments to online or directly to Sean and provide any things that they want updated. And through this process, you can see the public involvement process. We had General Plan Advisory Committee meetings, and we had 4 of those, and with different surveys going out that are still open. If anybody wants to take any surveys, they still are open online. You're going to see the responses of those surveys in this presentation for up to the current timeline of what we have. But at the next meeting, we'll most likely update it with the most recent surveys if there's been any additional. So if anybody's listening or watching, you still are able to participate in those surveys. They are by chapter, so you don't have to take 100 questions. You can just fill out the growth one or the water one or transportation or open space, whichever one you want. And so they're specific that way. And then the goal is to have it before commission in April, council in May with the 2 required hearings because of your population size, one at a different location than here. And then in November, it would go to the ballot as it's required to be ratified by voters. So again, the public outreach process, we had a public participation plan that was approved, and we were following that. We had the survey active on the website. As of March 6th, we had 211. GPAC meetings were December 13th, January 10th, the 24th, and again on February 6th. And then we also are having these public meetings. And each one of those GPAC meetings was open. We'd had some public participation on those as well. What would you like Kingman to be? This is one of the vision statements. These are some of the words. The bigger, obviously, the word, the more time it was mentioned. So a lot of comments about clean, safe, friendly, affordable. Everybody, you know, it's the what do you want to be in the future, helps with vision statements and things like that. And then should Kingman within the incorporated boundaries remain the same or grow? And so the majority is grow, right? And I want the importance is for these surveys for you guys to understand is, so what I like about doing these surveys is they're online. We're not waiting for people to come in, because usually at council meetings is you hear the most opposition, or the most people who are there because they're driven against something. But it's nice to see what the community that might not be participating in those meetings at least is seeing. And so here you had 110 responses on this one. And so 22 said to remain the same. Nobody said it should be going backwards, obviously, but 88 said it should grow. And then talking about annexing beyond the boundaries, 74 said yes. They were looking for annexation. They felt there was opportunities to grow. They were not, you know, some jurisdictions, some residents are afraid of growth. Kingman does not seem to be that way. And encouraging new housing types, 67% said yes. And we'll go into more details when we talk about the residential and land use types, what people were mentioning. So that, and this is exactly as written, so it included multifamily duplex and attached housing. So people were still in favor of that. The updated Kingman general plan will have a larger study area going further to the north and to the east. So it's going to incorporate the interchange to the east, and it's going to go further north. I didn't write the line, I'll put it on here, but how far north it goes, I can't remember. It's outside, so the general plan is not required to be incorporated boundaries, so it goes outside. So anytime, you want to go as further out as you can, so anytime someone has a development, or if another jurisdiction wants to do something, if anybody's doing anything in an area, they will seek your input. So if somebody's applying for a permit or something in the county sometimes, and it's in your study area, they will come to Kingman and say, hey, we're looking at doing this. We don't really have any opinion, but it's in your boundary. What are your thoughts? So it'll really help you guys out with, in case there's wildcat stuff going on or things that are not compatible with what you guys are looking for in the future, then you'll be at least invited to the table more actively by the county. And so again, here you can see we included more of the airport. That wasn't, kind of cut that piece in half before, so that's included. And then there's 9 elements: land use, growth, streets and circulation, public facilities and services, parks, trails and open space, cost of development, environmental, water, which is new and required, and economic development was added as well. And the added maps of increased the study area. We already had land use, but we're changing it. Growth area was updated. Parks and trails and circulation were also added. So the introduction implementation chapter is where you talk about the general plan vision based on the GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee meetings, and the vision comment surveys. The study area is explained, and then we updated the implementation to give better direction for amendments and criteria. So anytime someone wants to do a rezoning and it doesn't meet the area, it tells you what triggers a general plan amendment and what doesn't, or what is a major versus a minor. And we differed them based on acreage, and then we also further separate it based on the downtown, because 5 to 10 acres in the downtown is much more impactful a change than it is further out. So we wanted to make sure that if it's not a citywide, if you change 10 acres, it's a minor. We wanted to make sure if 10 acres in the downtown, that you guys were very much aware of it. And everything goes through the public hearing process, but we wanted there to be more in-depth discussion at that point. So that was really important for the group to make sure that the downtown was well preserved and thought of at all times. So the current proposed vision statement is that Kingman is a city with strong growth, a thriving history, inclusive communities, and strong housing and employment opportunities. Kingman provides opportunity for commercial, industrial, residential, and tourism within a dynamic economy with a strong labor force and unmatched living and working environment. Kingman provides tourism and recreation opportunities to residents and visitors that are safe, clean, and engaging, and Kingman is the place to be. So this is the vision of the goal of where you guys want to be, how all decisions should guide the staff, the council, and commission for the future. And if it's not those things, then you possibly need to think about relooking at the project or the plan. So this is kind of gets into a little bit of the weeds, but it's actually a really important part is the discussion on major and minor amendments. So here's this just kind of an overview about the changes. And here we talk about the separation of like one residential land use category to another residential category of 10 acres. These would be major amendments, or a continuous acres in the downtown growth area. And then here, if you go to another area outside the downtown, it's 60 acres or more is a major. So major are things that occur once a year, a calendar year. That's the difference really between major and minor. The majors are what you submit it, and they just change the code, the state statute, so it doesn't have to be within the calendar year. It's just with one year of that application. So so that's the difference. So if it's further out, you have more opportunities. You're still going to have amendments that are, if it's less than that. For instance, here you have a 2-step change, it's 10 acres, or they talk about 20 to 60 acres. So any kind of major changes from a residential category, like a 2-step, if you're going from, here we go back to this. We can see these different land use categories. So the general land use categories are they're general. They're not zoning. So the intent is to have several zoning categories within that general plan. So if they're taking 2 or 3 steps, they're going from residential to commercial, those are going to probably most likely be general plan amendments. We tried to also make it so that if there's things that are smaller, there's also administrative amendments. If it's just a little change, sometimes things are, sometimes residential is allowed in commercial and vice versa. If it's a small 2-acre or 5-acre piece, if it's community, local, and then it's still going to go through a zoning process, which is still a public hearing. So it really leaves a lot of opportunities for people to still work and cut down on timeframes, but it still offers for public input and hearings. But so here on minor also it talks about changes due to state law, text changes, talks about adjustments in the collector roadways, different things like that. So this is where anybody that's coming through, a developer or home builder or anybody, this is where they're going to look and see what is going to require me, or staff is going to say, you want to do this rezone, that's fine, but if it meets the general plan, then you can just proceed forward. If it doesn't, then here's the ways you would do that, and you have to justify in their application why it doesn't meet the general plan and why this proposed category is better. So that's probably clear as mud. I'm kind of breezing over that because it's a long presentation. But if you have any further questions about that, I can kind of dive into that on the side, but it can get very technical. So, and then here you can see where we added the study area. We expanded north to Crossman Road, Pate Road, Alamo, Cali Castano, Cactus Run, then east to United and West Road. So you can see the gray area kind of expanded a little bit. And then the red is the incorporated boundaries. And I apologize if I butchered any roads there, but we were trying to get as much area as possible that has a potential ability for annexation or is already developed or might be interested in coming into the city. So this, in the first chapter, which is everyone always is usually the first one everybody looks at, is land use. So 112 responses is community was kind of divided on a feeling that there's a housing shortage. It was a little more 50-50, but of the shortage that felt there was one, they thought it was aging housing stock, majority. And then less new homes being built or more elderly staying in place. Do you feel your community needs more townhomes and low-density apartments? 60% said yes, whereas 40% disagreed. And then it was 50-50 on if you needed more single-family homes. See, do you feel your community has enough retail options? And the answer is no, primarily at 90% about. And then do you feel your community has enough office space and medical office? And 55% said no. So they're not so, in these surveys it's showing that they don't feel that there's really needs for housing as much as there is more higher density housing, but then the retail and the medical office. Employment opportunities, again, was a larger 86-87% felt that there was not enough employment opportunities, and that the city should encourage higher density development on vacant or underutilized parcels that already have infrastructure in place, which is actually just really good city planning in general. If you have utilities and infrastructure there, that's where it should be encouraged. And so the hard part when you come into projects that come before you is going to be those are usually infill pieces surrounded by existing buildings, which means you have surrounding property owners that have a very vocal opinion. And so when you're looking at this, just remember that infill, development of infill is the most appropriate place because the infrastructure is in place, you're filling in the need in that spot. And so that's sometimes difficult because the residents come out and they just like the vacant space sometimes. Higher density development should be limited to designated growth areas, 73% agree. If you weren't aware, so the land use chapter is its own, but there's also a growth area chapter, which is the next one. And there are specific areas of the city that are designated as growth areas. And those are areas that you would focus grants, infrastructure improvements, you would attention, different things in that. And we'll go into that in the next chapter. But that's where they were, the cities were, residents were saying that they felt most intense development should occur. And then I would be in favor of denser development in downtown to preserve open space, to have lower densities outside the downtown area. You had about 61% agreed to that. So that's sometimes where people will trade off densities based on where it's at. And then older commercial and residential uses should be revitalized. 53% said agree, strongly agree. I mean, the majority agreed. So strongly agreed at 53%, 36% agreed, strongly disagree with one person, and neither agree or disagree, they're unsure. So most people felt that older commercial and residential properties should be revitalized. So here's the updated land use map. It defined net density calculation. Previously, it had not, so that's clarified. We updated to 12 land use categories, which are rural, low density, medium density, intermediate density, high density, and that's all residential. And then you have local commercial, which was reduced from 4. Commercial, there was 4 different categories. So now there's local commercial and regional commercial. Recreational hospitality is new. And then light industrial and industrial. And then public, we removed the quasi-public. It's either public or it's not. And then parks and open space. So we removed the neighborhood planning areas, which you had before, which were like neighborhood 1, 2, 3, 4, I believe, or something like that. And so we removed those because they were, as someone coming in, I actually developed properties with other developers. Sometimes I didn't know how to understand that. I didn't know how to read that. Staff didn't really understand how to interpret it and how to use it. So removing that issue completely. And just keeping it, the KISS method, I'm sure you've heard of. Just don't make it more complex than it needs to be, right? Try to shorten things up. So these are the land use categories, and we'll go into them. So here you have rural density means 1 unit dwelling unit per acre or less. Low density is 1 to 2, medium 3 to 8, intermediate 9 to 16, and high density is 17 to 28. And so here you can see as the proposed land uses on the new map, you will have about 63% is for land uses would be residential, 5% is commercial, a little over 11 is industrial, 4% public, 15% open space, and then you have right-of-way and recreational hospitality. The reason we put recreational hospitality in there, we don't actually have any categories for it, but we want to have the opportunity for people if they wanted to do a private recreational use without it being, we don't want to consider it open space, but you want them to have like a commercial entity if they wanted to have trails or camp area, but it was a private entity because public open space, parks and open space means more of a public access. So we wanted something that was more of a private driven recreational commercial type use. So that recreational hospitality opens the door for the future for people to put it into that category. So we had some current concerns at the general plan meetings that they were just concerned because they wanted to make sure those biking or Jeep tours or something stayed open space recreational types and didn't get too intense and commercial. And so that was just to make sure that it doesn't get overburdened. And sometimes that's happened. A lot of jurisdictions are having that issue they'll have with wineries, recreational, different types of uses, farms, but then they become over entertainment and they start going amphitheaters and restaurants, and that was not the goal for this type of thing. So. Was there any questions so far? I know I'm going through them. Okay, the next chapter is the growth area, which ties in very tightly with the land use. And do you feel the immediate area is growing? We had 118 responses, and 72% said growing. It is growing. And do you consider your community to be rural, suburban, or urban? Most said rural, and then a little of suburban, but yeah. So that's where their thoughts were on that. And then would you like to keep new development from coming into your local area? 74%, almost 75% said no. And then would you prefer your area to be included as a growth area for new development? And 75% agreed that they would like their area included, which is kind of amazing. This is not typically something you see in a jurisdiction. There's sometimes a little bit of disconnect between residents of wanting growth because they want growth but not near them. And this is actually stating that 90 of the people that took the survey felt they would encourage it in their area. They want to see it. So the growth areas, we removed again the tiered system, and so there's 8 new growth areas. So the downtown Kingman, Rancho Santa Fe, Centennial, we need to talk about that one with Sean, but then there's also West Beale Street, Grace Neal Parkway Corridor, and these are highlighted in the different colors. So you can see like you have the Airport Industrial Park, the downtown area is much smaller. It's like hugging Route 66. Santa Rosa, Bank Street, Grace Neal Parkway. And then with each area, we provided direction as to what that means for that area. For instance, in the airport, we're focusing on industrial, employment, office kind of things. We're just not encouraging residential. In the downtown, we're encouraging hospitality, revitalization, re-infrastructure of existing buildings, things like that. And so those are what those growth areas are. And I can show you those. They're actually in the document. Let's see if you want. So, and no, I forgot to mention, at the end of every chapter, there is a section on the goals, policies, implementation measures. So there are action items that council, staff, commission can see as what is something that will get you to that goal of that chapter. So they're actionable, they're, talking about updating existing zoning ordinances or updating the design and permitted use list, seeking out areas for annexation, work with landowners and existing underutilized properties, and things like that. So everything here is encouraged, guidelines, nothing is a requirement, it is still a policy document, so it is a guideline to get you there. With the growth chapter, it has different identified growth areas, and it talks about, keys of gateways, like the West Beale is a key gateway from Kingman to Vegas. Grace Neal is an important corridor from Stockton Road to the airport park, and so on. It talks about different areas surrounded by adjacent existing development and so on. So there's a lot of different detail in there we can go over if you like. The next chapter was the circulation area. And that is that most felt there's not enough transportation methods in the area. And we talk about the circulation, it's not only car focused, it's on pedestrian, bicycles, bus, anything. So do you feel there are enough they felt the roadways are currently too busy by 77%. So 85 people felt they were too busy, whereas 25 said it was just enough level of traffic, they had no issues. More pedestrian connections, obviously, was 71% agree, and that they felt that there was about 50-50 felt that there was ability to add new development with the existing roadways. They weren't worried about being overburdened with new development or higher density development. Obviously, with more development comes the density and the traffic, but about 50-50 felt that the capacity level of service of those existing roadways was still appropriate to add more development. And then should Kingman improve transit, bus, public transportation services to increase traffic, to increase mobility and reduce traffic and maintain air quality? And 91 said yes. And then do you feel safe walking, biking to a store from your home along the roadways? And 71% said no. So that again tags to the question before about pedestrian circulation, about wanting more pedestrian safe connections. So the highest priority that people felt facing transportation funding was maintenance of existing. So they're really harping on the existing roadways, making sure those continue to be maintained. And then next was expansion of roadways. So those two, obviously the biggest expenditures right there. So that's the two things that the residents were most concerned about. And then I always like to ask this when it comes to transportation, because the roadways and how people interpret the surveys are also based upon their work. So if you work outside your home, how many miles do you commute one way? And so 30% were retired. Almost 40% were only drove 1 to 5 miles to work. And then it goes so on from there. So work from home was 10%, 10 plus miles was 16%, less than a mile is 3. So you can kind of divvy up like, okay, well, these people didn't find there was an issue because of the traffic, because they don't go at that time of day, or so on. So those are different things to consider when you're looking at the survey results. So in the streets and circulation chapter, we added a new circulation map accounting for the new proposed interchanges along the interstate, and then updated goals and policies reflecting the public response and GPAC committee comments. We defined the street classification system and identified the existing system in Kingman. But not, because before it was actually just referencing another document. This one we actually put it in there so people have something in their hand to, when they're going through it, they can cross-reference things. And then we included more information about the railroad, airport, the CART system, and the bicycle and pedestrian circulation. So we talked about opportunities with those to expand when there's availability or there's new surveys or studies being done. For facilities and services survey, it was 110. 48% felt they were unsure about response times in emergency situations, hopefully because they've never had to call them. And so you have the other half, they were kind of disagree on if they have currently adequate response times. Again, that also ties into circulation and transportation about ability to get around. And so that ties in with that. So with this section, we updated the police and fire standard details and existing water and wastewater department information and capacity. So this entails all the different departments. Water, we have a separate section for water, but this talks about the water department, wastewater department, police, fire, sanitary, trash, library, all things. It talks briefly on schools, but the city is not the maintainer of the schools, so we don't go into too much detail on that. That's not something within the city's purview to do. So we talked about library services and operation, and then updated the goals and policies to provide continued services and quality. We talked a little bit about level of services again in there, about response times, but those are always, it's for the department to continually update. And we talked about the current buildings and vehicles that they have and opportunities if they need to expand, and what part of the city would be best to expand into. For parks, trails, and open space, everybody usually always feels open space should be a priority of 80% here. Kind of surprised it's not 100, but you have 80% saving open space, and then you had about 86% said they utilize the recreation in the community. So with that, of course, open space is typically held by the city, and so that's a cost. So when they say those things in a lot of jurisdictions, they want to save the mountains and all that kind of stuff. So they have to be educated as far as what that means. Is it saving view sheds? Is it just city parks? Or if you want to actually conserve a whole area, it's going to require acquisition, which requires costs and taxes and things like that. So that has to do with everybody wants it, nobody wants to pay for it, right? So do you feel the existing recreational opportunities are adequate? It was kind of 50-50. And then do you feel there are enough recreation opportunities in the city? Majority, 80% said no. So there's definitely room to grow. I know you guys have some great facilities here, and there's some that you were, there's the soccer facilities, and then it's like how to expand some of these and different things in areas that are missing for meeting your level of service. So Kingman has adequate open space for passive recreation, which means wildlife, habitat, and maintenance of natural terrain. Majority agreed. The next group down was neither agree or disagree. So it was back and forth. There was a small percentage that strongly disagreed. But the good thing is a majority said that they did feel the parks in Kingman are clean and inviting, the ones that they do use. So that was a little like 75%. So when they asked what's missing in Kingman recreationally, you had parks, and then roller skating rink. That's a little hard one to get. I know they're coming back, but I don't know. And there's just all the different things. People are talking about community center, pools, trails, indoor fields, soccer fields, fishing, walking paths, mountain bikes. So these were the ones that just after 160 responses, I think open space was the largest response of survey we had. And these were their primary comments. So some of these obviously are private and would be private entities. So if anybody wants to build any of these things privately and hold a mini golf thing or roller skating rink, go for it. It's definitely, people are asking for it. And so with this element, we updated to reflect there was a 2020 Parks and Master Trail Plan that Kingman had done. And so we updated the general plan to line up with that and meet their level of service. We pulled back some things out of the general plan and kept it the more detailed stuff as it should be in the master plan for the parks and trails. We did add park site standards and a detailed list of what the existing parks are and what they provide. Highlighted safety and security and maintenance, which was a big comments back and forth. So that was added to implementation about making sure what's there is being maintained. There's no security, lighting, things of safety, so people feel more comfortable being there. And also talked about funding in the implementation and policies, about how to go after grants, how to go after public-private partnerships, just opportunities that are available so that people are more geared to, instead of just always, as usual, asking the city to just pay for everything, how can this actually be achieved, right, within a budget? So that one talks about the different parks there. You can see some of the trails on the west side. And then cost of development, this is the chapter regarding How do you build it? More so on the private side, however, though. But Kingman provides the infrastructure so you can live the way you want. These are things that you have to go more into detail on, like 66% said no. And then 75% said that they don't feel there's enough staff to provide the needs for the supporting the growing city, because Kingman is growing and has so many opportunities that they're just a little concerned about how you can actually get it to, once you do expand and provide all these opportunities, how are you going to support it? And then, of course, then 88% said, yes, the city should seek more grants and national funding to help incentivize this new development. And more private, 83% more private partnerships to develop and address problem sites within the city. And so in the cost of development survey, we also talk about all funding mechanisms that are available to the city that they can go into. And that's also in the implementation measures. We talk about different things which you currently may or may not be using. There's grants, there's bonds, there's federal funding, there's state funding, and it goes on, and especially the discussion about the private partnerships regarding parking and who pays for the infrastructure and how you can go into capital improvement programs or different things that work for the city in different ways. But they're all listed out, and they're all suggestions, not requirements. They're all just opportunities, is what this chapter is about. And it talks about trying to purchase sites. The city should try to purchase sites to redevelop them in the future. About 72% said that. And those have to do with probably mostly likely vacant sites or sites that have been derelict for a while, or the property owner's not doing what they're supposed to maintain it. Even if it is a vacant site, there's some concerns. Some cities have done that to compile properties, and then they can do an RFP to have somebody come in and build it and bring that property in the way they want it to. And then, do you think new development should cover the cost for the new development? Of course, 86% said yes. So if you're new development, you need to pay for yourself. And then on cost of development, so we updated the opportunities list, like I mentioned, for funding mechanisms, and we updated the goals and policies to strengthen and provide reinvestment and development partnerships, and for shared costs and public partnerships for incentives for quality private development to try to get the type of development you want, such as with those RFPs I was mentioning. Instead of just hoping somebody comes in, you put it out there and you have people presenting to you what they would offer. Environmental resources, we updated the list of existing natural resources, added details. We added a historical component to this chapter because it wasn't in there before. So we talked a little about the historic properties within Kingman and the importance, and just putting it in the general plan shows your dedication to making sure that happens. The worst you can do is leave it out and it doesn't get mentioned. But this way, when grants come out or bonds or federal funding, it shows that you have a dedication to maintaining this history. And it talks about mitigation measures with protecting air and water quality and also retaining the historic resources and character of the city. Of course, 90% said continue to preserve the historic areas of the downtown and historic Route 66. That is important to them. That is, the city, iconic. Water, everybody's concerned about water, not only in Kingman, but everywhere. And then we asked the question, do you feel your water use has gone up? About 40% said it's remained the same. And you have 35% up and then about 22% down, and then other people were unsure. But just interesting to know when you talk to people or you're looking at your water systems and what you're looking at, even though there may be low flow things going on or less grass or whatever, where people feel that their water use is actually going. And interesting, like 68% said they felt that they were already using low flow water fixtures in their home, so that people were already doing it. A lot of times you go to Home Depot, the federal government's requiring you to, they're only selling some certain things anyway, so a lot of these things just naturally happen on their own. And then is Kingman on the right track to satisfy current and future water demands through sustainable and renewable water resources? Most people were unsure because they're just not aware what the city's doing. So that might be, when it comes to water concerns, might just be a good educational outreach, outreach person for the city to just say what you guys are doing. Are you doing things in your building or vegetation? Like what is the city doing? They were just wondering because they are not sure, it seems like mostly. So we added this element because it wasn't there previously and it is required. We had provided a detailed overview of water supplies and future demand, provided different conservation, reuse, and supply demand management techniques that are out there. So different things that the city could do, depending if they want to. It does not make it required because, again, it's a policy document. Outlined water education and outreach opportunities, so implementation of like partnering with schools or going with the businesses, and then providing goals and policies to ensure water quality and quantity for Kingman's future. So then going into economic development, Kingman should work to promote the redevelopment of vacant, underutilized, and commercial failing areas. Almost 100% agreed. That kind of ties into a previous one. And then larger commercial areas should have access to transit, including light rail, streetcar, or bus service. 80% agreed. That's 211 responses. So actually, economic development was higher. More intense commercial areas should allow higher density housing, including townhomes and apartments. Again, it's a little bit of 60% here. And then future employment types and job base should support housing types to allow people to live, work in Kingman. So majority, I mean, you got close to 90% there agreeing out of 211 people. So that it's like the question right now, chicken or egg, right? You got housing and you got jobs, which comes first, you know? But if you bring the jobs, then how do you put the people in, where do they live? And so they need to support each other, and that needs to be recognized, even if they're not in the same project, but you need to be aware economic development-wise of what you have available, what you need. Are those jobs coming in? Are they going to be able to afford the single family, or are they going to need the townhome or the lock and leave type? So being able to make sure you have that workforce provided for. And then Kingman should encourage a variety of light industrial manufacturing and tech uses to ensure more employment opportunities. Almost 100% agreed on that one again. And then obviously increasing opportunities for economic development. I mean, earlier they were saying they want commercial, they want more office, medical, they want, of course, they want everything, because that's so it makes a thriving and successful community. So, but they are definitely in favor of the industrial manufacturing and technology. You know, we've expanded the area around the airport, added some more employment and industrial areas around there as well, connections showing future connections of roadways for the airport, just to support those future goals. Kingman, this is kind of interesting because Kingman is a tourist destination with a range of attractions throughout the city. Majority disagreed with that. So they don't feel currently that it has enough activities to keep people here, which is some of the comments we've gotten, is that you visit, you drive through, you don't stop and stay. And so focusing on that is going to be a big thing for economic development, to get people to stop and stay. Kingman has tourism experiences and products that appeal to people with diverse backgrounds and income levels. And so that was mixed 50-50. So they encourage the history of Route 66 and the city's history, but they just feel that there needs to be more expansion in that tourism and the history to get people to stay here. And then believe the top two challenges facing Kingman as a destination for tourists is the limited nightlife and entertainment, so they don't feel there's enough restaurants or bars or things in the evening. And then also they felt like a drive-by city. So here you've got over 55%. These percentages don't match according to the thing, but maybe that's numbers. But the majority felt, or they were allowed to choose any that they wanted. So that's why the numbers don't equal 100. But yeah, and then it goes down to community resistance. You guys are probably more aware of whatever that means. But then the need for downtown commercial. So it's a lack of a lot of things concerning entertainment, which also spurs into open space and parks and recreation and tourism and economy. So it's every just like the general plan, every little thing touches each other. They're not isolated from each other. They all work together. So this is a new element that we added information on about the existing. We detailed the existing workforce that you have in Kingman by industry. And I know in the GPAC meeting we had some comments because people felt it was low, but the issue is because of the workforce doesn't take into account the airport because it is outside city boundaries. And so that skews it a little bit, but it still has, so it's, I believe, mostly medical and administrative for the city and the county employees is what's showing up for Kingman versus having the industrial manufacturing, which is at the airport. So the goal is to grab some of the parcels that are around the airport that are within the city or could be within the city and bring that economic into the city tax base. And then, so we talked about labor force and the education attainment of that labor force. Listed opportunities for economic development areas in the downtown, I-40 commercial, industrial and office, rail, airport, industrial park. And then detailed the regional trade opportunities with the proximity to the different areas, and policies incentive to grow housing and quality workforce to draw new industries in here. So you want to expand, and and the opportunities for the new types of, I mean, anything, there's all kinds of new stuff coming out there everywhere. You don't know what it is, but Kingman wants to see what it is. Let us see what it is, bring it here. Maybe it'll be super successful. You guys will be, one of the forefront people to do that when it comes to different types of technologies and industrial or manufacturing or employment. And then use tourism as that economic driver. So the next steps are we're going to continue to receive comments and survey responses, as I had mentioned earlier. We're in the middle of the 60-day, which will go until April 12th. After that, we're going to start working on the draft document, which we have, and going through and taking all those comments, putting them into spreadsheets, taking your guys' comments, any other GPAC or commission, anybody's comments, even staff's, and going through and revising it and doing a red line strike through so you guys can see changes, what's from then to now. And then let all the comments as well know. Sometimes just so you're aware, sometimes on these general plans, you will get comments like, I really want a Target, I want an AJ's. And that is not what the general plan does, but we can encourage, certain commercial areas or incentives to go into I-40 corridors or different areas and encourage opportunities for incentives and things like that to bring those. But we don't actually, so when sometimes we get a comment like that, we'll say, the comment will be like noted or something like that, or, that's something for the next steps. That's because general plans and zoning is not user specific, it's use based. So sometimes we'll have that. And we compile that matrix and update the draft, and then we'll bring it back to the Planning Commission on April 17th, I believe, is what we're scheduled currently. And then, so they'll review it, provide comments. Hopefully, if Planning Commission, if you guys have any larger comments, like something that is those are better to have before that meeting, because hopefully what you're doing at that point is making minor recommendations and any changes that we will then update and provide to council based on whatever comments and changes you had, for council to then review. The first meeting is going to be another kind of public hearing, but not a recommending one, and then the second will be recommendation. Because of your city size, you have to do 2 different locations. So the first one is a public hearing, and then the second one is the public hearing with the recommendation. So, or the vote. So, yeah, you guys are really quiet. And I know you guys have worked on some of these before, but if we want to go through any questions, some more details, I know you guys don't, it's online, you guys sent it, but I don't know if you probably don't have it in front of you. So do you have any things you need questions explained? Anybody?
I have a question.
Yes.
When you did this, you do the downtown, have you designated the historical part? Because when we did it back in 2020, the downtown, there's like, I think 52 historical.
So
I didn't see any of that in the.
So that's not going to be in the general plan. That's going to be in the planning and the planning. What is it called?
Zoning.
The zoning ordinance. Right, so the zoning ordinance lays out what is
allowed in that area.
Right, and that's we call it the heritage preservation because we're preserving more than just the buildings and things like that, different types of cultures and things that are in the area. So that the general plan just kind of says, hey, we need to make sure and keep this in mind. And then when we get into the zoning ordinance, right, the zoning ordinance gets down into the specifics of that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep.
So just to follow up too, so we kept it pretty vague, like you were saying, for historical and the resources, but we did add 5 policies and implementation measures for the historical district. Was about protecting and reinvesting in historical resources, and then further striving to identify those locations. And historical resources within the city to provide to that's a goal to actually create a formal document which is a totally different process, and then has to do with the attorney's going to love it because there's all kinds of implications when you start putting things on a historical map and what you can and can't do. And then providing opportunities for adaptive reuse and underlies historical structures and different things like that to try to reinvigorate those areas. And identifying grants and financial assistance and talks about for helping rehabilitate and make more habitable historic properties, which are, may not meet code anymore, which is a big problem we're seeing everywhere, is that you want to have commercial or residential inside these buildings because they're beautiful buildings. But in order to meet code, you basically destroy the character and the uniqueness of it, or you can't get sprinklers in there or something. And so it's about the opportunities to figure out how to update the codes, how to revise things to make it so you can use those buildings.
Yeah, I have a consideration. I know in the news they've had that SB 2570 that just this afternoon or earlier today, the governor vetoed. But I don't think it's going away. And is that impacting this process at all of making this plan? Because, I mean, it's pretty significant effect on planners.
Right.
If we basically can't, put restrictions on the size of a lot if it's above 1,500 square feet. That's drastically going to change what we do, at least on our commission. And I don't want to say it's blindsiding us, but it seems like it's moving very quickly, and it's probably going to happen again without a referendum or anything. So is there some sort of plan for addressing this going forward?
Yeah, so that is something that's been going on for several years now. It felt like for a while there was nothing ever on land planning at the state, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, every year let's do 6 or 7 of these things, which completely dismantle planning entirely. And so thankfully that one was vetoed. We had a whole bunch of jurisdictions and mayors and council members that are opposed to it. I don't think, like you said, I think that portion, which we were most concerned about, I'm knock on wood, won't ever take because it's so drastic to remove in Arizona setbacks, lot sizes, and things like that. The thing that they've been getting at more, I think that we hit on in here, is talking about ADUs, accessory dwelling units, different opportunities to get the creative tiny homes, things like that. We talk in here about revising design standards to make it so it is more open and opportunities for different types. Because the thing is, if you get too strict on, which I think is what they were going after, was if you get too strict design standards, you're going to get the same thing everywhere, right? People are going to follow the bare minimums, you're going to get no creativity, and it's going to be the same. And so I think they're trying to loosen that up too much by totally eliminating them, where instead of setting standards and going back and forth. And you'll see, if you look at it in previous years, they went back and pulled back quite a bit. There was one that said you could build to the height whatever was next to you, but then obviously the after effect is it compounds. And then you get further and further out with a 20-story building. And so a lot of these things get written without the unthought about consequences. And I think thankfully, I think at the state, we have enough people who are doing good things and lobbyists that actually work for the Planning Association and the cities to prevent that from getting chaotic. But I do think, like you said, it's going to come back until something changes. I know they're talking about timelines, which is mentioned in here, about staff as well, about keeping the staff being able to serve the community. But we do talk about higher density and implementation measures to focus on updating zoning codes as it's needed, updating design standards to be more flexible. And I think the majority of people, when I talk about things like that at the state, is that they feel if your jurisdiction is taking care of it and being responsive, hopefully they will stay away from you. And that is kind of the goal, to make sure that we're updating things.
Well, I noticed, sorry to keep going on this, I noticed that you had a lot of pie charts where people were pretty in favor of investing downtown,
Mm-hmm.
Why can't the city, subtly or maybe more dramatically push developers to creating something similar to the Ott building, that sort of mixed commercial, residential, multi-story? Why can't we have multiple downtown throughout the city, like a higher density area where people can rent above, say, a commercial? Why aren't we giving? It doesn't make any sense to me that their only option is just very dense cookie cutter subdivisions or little banlieues comprised of short-term rentals, that's the only solutions I see offered. Why can't we have like the Ott building just right over there with a few stories of people living above it, say over behind Walmart in that little strip we've been talking about making a fishing pond? Like, it seems like we should try something a little more creative than what we've been doing. I don't know. I have some reservations about the short-term rental. You know, Sean, when we went there, they were pushing that pretty heavily. I've seen renters butted right up against neighbors' houses, and this bill would have allowed, you know, improvements. There'd be no minimum size, and they could be put 5 feet away from the edge of a property. You know, the setbacks would go away. So I think we got to get ahead of that as a city quickly, you know, to give some other options other than what we've been hearing lately, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so that we do talk, so without getting into the zoning code, that's where we just talk about updating the subdivision or the, you know, the zoning ordinance and things like that. And with regards to state stuff, just like you did for any other thing that comes through, the best way is for the city to take the proactive approach before they adopt something at the state and put it into the code so that you guys actually have time to react to any applications that might come through. But without knowing what they're going to do, you never, I mean, every year it changes, it's something else, so. But it's in that general vicinity of they want, and like at this federal level right now, Congress is doing a thing about grants. And part of the grant has to do with getting more affordable housing, and it talks, but the thing is that the cities have to have already gone through the zoning ordinance update or have a public hearing in order to apply for funding to push this affordable housing. So there's all kinds of different things, but nobody's actually, there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing that's going to fix the housing issue. And so everybody's trying to they just keep writing bills until they find something that nothing's going to, it has to be I always say it's a three-pronged approach. You're going to have the city. The city is not responsible for housing, but they provide the development and approve plans and things like that. So there's the city and what they approve, but there's also your nonprofits that are going to help out, and then your developers. So until you get all three of them on the same page, one's not going to be able to fix it for the other.
I'd like to see the city stand up a little bit more to the developers. I know they've got some big pockets, but just as somebody that's bought vacant land, I mean, all of you guys know it, you got to pony up the cash. You know, you can't get the loans like you normally would. And a lot of these developers, they have a lot of money. And a lot of these vacant lots around the city are just held. You know, we have low taxes here. You know, just compare that to other jurisdictions, we're doing pretty good with taxes. There's no incentive for these developers to either sell out these properties, or when they do, they just hold it until they develop. And they develop with certain stipulations, like they want ultra dense, you know, which this bill might allow. So I don't know what the solution is there. Maybe somebody smarter than me can find a way to incentivize them to let go of some of these. Maybe not being a developer, just being more like a land speculator, buying the land low and selling it for higher, because there's a lot of people that want to develop in this town. And if you look at one place that we should be proud of, it's up at the base of the Wallapies. You know, that's the place we should showcase those larger lots, custom homes. It's not ugly. It's not a tract home made of chicken wire and stucco homes. Like, maybe we should find a way to get these lands out of the developers' hands and allow more people to build custom homes. It would help individual contractors or their teams rather than just having one cookie cutter subdivision after another. Just a thought.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
I have another question. Having been on planning and zoning for different times, we went through the 2020 and we've had, you know, we inherited Stockton Hill Road. And every time we try to expand it, somebody wants to change it. Well, when we did Wallapai Mountain Road, center line, we went 300 feet on each side for commercial because Stockton Hill was only limited to 200 feet. And we had commercials in there. We had several we had to redo to 250 feet to give them exemptions and stuff like that. I didn't see anything in there for Wallapai Mountain Road to keep it from the center line either side for commercial.
And some of these discussions may be getting a little more into zoning as opposed to the general plan.
Well, I thought that was in the general plan, we had to do that. Because when we did it the first time, we had 6 neighborhood areas, and I know Wallapai Mountain Road was one of them.
Right.
And that was in the general plan. Well, that was in 2020.
We do talk about different areas, like along Stockton. Is one of these, there's Stockton.
So I know in the larger areas, so again, it's partially mentioned in the general plan, but then once we get into the zoning, right, that's where the zoning comes into play, right? The general plan has those areas as predominantly commercial along that corridor, right?
Yes.
And then we go even further in the zoning ordinance to where those are, I'm trying to think what it's called, but it's called the Kingman Overlay District or whatever, to where there's only certain styles of development and types of businesses and things like that can be in those areas. So that's gets narrowed down even more in the zoning code. So the general plan shows those areas as predominantly this is what we want to be developed there, right? And then it starts to get more specific as we get into the other plans. So
Thank you.
Yeah, the general plan doesn't talk about themes or design styles. That's more for the other codes. But so for instance, in the different categories that are listed, we have, for instance, local commercial or regional commercial, which are in different parts of the city. And we put in here, typical zoning categories may include but are not limited to. So we have a list, T5MS, T5G, T4N, T5N, C1, C2 commercial categories. That's local. And then we go to regional, and it expands that also to C3. And so it's allowing all those different commercial uses in the zoning, which defines what you're looking for, and the permitted uses and things like that. Those would all be acceptable in that category. But it's also leaving it open, which is why I wrote typical zoning categories may include but are not limited to, in case you guys want to do the implementation measure of updating your zoning codes. Then your zoning, this way now your general plan will not be out of date compared to your zoning. So it lets you continue on with the process without making this an out-of-date document.
Any other questions for Jessica? Mr. Waters?
I don't know if it's too late, but I know we had a little blurb in the general plan about West Beale and, the expected, like, repurposing of it for, I guess it was going to be apartments or something. If it's not too late, maybe we could put like a roundabout, right now, downtown is going to be an off-ramp, basically. If you look at the plans, they're going to take what's currently 93 going through Coyote Pass, and they're going to turn it, and it's going to be an off-ramp that leads to it rather than a straight shot. So what I'm getting at is people on the freeway, historically they'd stop. They'd realize they have to go to the bathroom, and they'd drive on through Kingman. They'd see our Welcome to Kingman sign. They're not going to do that anymore. They're going to just keep it in high gear and just bypass us, basically. If we could make it like a roundabout and pitch it where it's like an advanced thing, like people do it in Europe, so it's smarter than America. There's ways to like make it sound like it's a avant-garde thing. We might still get those people that make that bathroom call and come into downtown. Because I have a hunch, living down here, it's going to have an impact on us. So I don't know what pull we have over the transportation department or whatever, but if the city could make that happen like they did in Wickenburg, I think that would be a win for us. So,
if you want me to just jump in real fast, it's an ADOT project.
Yep.
They've just awarded the bid to do the construction for the bypass. So yeah, that kind of input is pass.
Yeah, that's a shame.
Sorry.
The one thing we can do is just mention West Beale Street is just that the goal is to slow down traffic into the area to, and we can talk about mitigation, measures for that area. But it's only like a high level suggestion of what we would look for development to bring into this area. But but it's not going to change whatever ADOT's going to do. But we can talk about what Kingman's able to control.
All right. Well, a couple other suggestions since we're here. The names for these new streets, for the two new interchanges that we're having on the other side of town, Rattlesnake Wash and Santa Fe, Rancho Santa Fe. We're going to name this. I cannot believe we're going to name them that. I mean, if you drive just down past Yucca, there's another Santa Fe exit. There's like so many different references to Santa Fe. It's the most vanilla thing you could possibly name a street. So, like I've had this discussion before. Why don't we name it something like Lindbergh for Charles Lindbergh, or Clark Gable Boulevard, or something that would make people interested in the history of Kingman, you know? And Rattlesnake Wash. I mean, there's negative. It's a pejorative almost, you know? You're going to get bit by a rattlesnake if you stop here. It's a chance for us to highlight our history. It seems like we're losing it by just naming it after a subdivision name. I mean, I realize that'll make somebody happy, but it's not good for the city, you know? Like, maybe we still have a chance to rename that.
Gary, you bring up a valid point, but at this point in time, just like Carl mentioned before, at this point in time, we can't change those until we get them approved through the ADOT. Actually, once we get them built. After they're built, then we can entertain that. But at this point in time, we can't do it. Otherwise, it would set the whole program back even farther, getting the ADOT approval and getting it done.
It's colossal yet fragile.
Huh?
Right?
It's not a general plan issue either.
Yeah, it's not. Once again, a general plan is what? A vision, its goals at 20,000 foot level. Then it comes down to zoning issues and our specific zoning code and narrowing it down for all these different ideas that we're talking about. This is just a general plan, general goals, dreams, all that we would like to see happening in Kingman. Remember, you have to remember, that's what general plan is.
No, I get you, Mayor. Yeah, I missed the very beginning of this message. Sorry, I'm on vacation. But, okay, let's start from the very beginning. At the very beginning, we've got our project statement. Why on earth are we putting, like HR speak, like inclusive community? Why not put welcoming in there, you know? I mean, the people I meet that come to Arizona, or this town in particular, they want to get away from California and words like inclusivity, or just, it smacks of HR. And I don't know if we're just the only people that are going to be seeing this stuff, but like there's little improvements like that, you know, like naming your city streets in a way that makes it more appealing to people that might want to live here, that I think apply to this process. But I'll shut up now. So.
No, these are good comments to figure out.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Jessica?
Thank you. I actually want to go on, actually, because I know you guys want to probably leave anyway, but I'll hit on Gary's comment. This is the vision statement. I wanted to get your guys' feedback on, you know, this is with the GPAC and some of the survey responses. If there's any wordsmithing or things that you guys are not comfortable with or want to change, I'd really like to hear anything on that one, because it's the main vision statement for the document. If there's anything you feel it should be included or tightened up. And again, like what Mayor mentioned, this is a long-range plan. This is a 10-year document, but it's a 10-year document with a 20-year vision, maybe even further out, you know, because you know how long it takes for these interchanges and things. So by the time, you know, 10 years has gone by, you're not even halfway through what you need to really do to get to the next thing. So like when you're talking about revitalizing the airport or the industrial area, that's not going to happen in 10 years. You can start the process, and these are the steps to get you to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. But it is a very much larger, long-range plan of where you want to be.
I do like Gary's comment about, and I see what you're talking about where it says inclusive there. I like the word welcoming also. You know,
Yeah.
take inclusive out, and I mean, are we following into the same all across the country that they want to use inclusive? I get where you're coming from on that, you know.
Have we been
but that's something
Right.
that's what this is all about, is talking about right here.
We tried not to put live, work, play in there because everybody uses that. So.
I know. Any other comments? Smiley?
The only question I have is on the sample size, is that a normal response from a city this size?
Yeah, everybody, every jurisdiction's a little different, but typically, I mean, it's probably been a little bit less. We're finding we're having some issues, you know, with the public, and sometimes they're feeling that they are They don't want, we didn't ask for addresses or emails or anything like that. We were hoping that that would encourage more people to participate. Again, anybody watching, please participate, survey, survey, survey. I encourage all of you guys as well, because you're all residents. But typical survey size for any kind of jurisdiction is about 9–10%. It's always very low.
Yeah, I was just curious, because
Yeah.
the people that don't like it, we'll hear from once we adopt
Right,
it.
right.
And I don't understand that, but I was just wondering if that was typical.
Yeah, I always think it's very amusing because even planners who we do all of our surveys, even in our association, on like when we have votes for things, we only get a 10% participation rate, and we're the ones that write them. But it is difficult to get. That's why you try to do the public hearings and get, because people are more comfortable in public, so they have opportunities at that time to speak as well. But definitely, if they have any comments, they can, they go into the Excel file online if they have further comments about the general plan, if they don't want to write Sean, or they just want to type it in there. We're not interested in where people live. We're not going to come out and complain about you. We just want to have the information. The more data, the better for us.
I think the city, if they want to, I agree with, entertainment and stuff like that, but in order to attract some of these name-run restaurants and everything, they go by your population. They go by the city. Yeah, I don't understand, the city's not, you include Butler and Birdland and all that, we'd have the qualifications. But until we annex them and get the population up, to get these restaurants and stuff to come in here, you attract them. I mean, we're getting tired of the fast food places. Mm-hmm. We got maybe 3 or 4 good restaurants, and that's about it. But in order to get the other Red Lobsters and Olive Garden and those to come in, city's going to have to take it and annex that to get the population up.
Yep.
For these people to come in.
Yeah.
These restaurants and stuff to come in.
And then I also encourage, because we looked through all the census data as well. This is a common problem in Arizona, is you have a lot of your snowbirds. And so the majority of people who do that live here more than 6 months of the year, but they still want to claim their home in the Midwest or wherever. And so that definitely takes the population count away, and it takes the federal funding away that should be going towards Kingman. And so people, when I worked for the Census Bureau, it was very frustrating because they didn't understand that even though they've been here 7 months here, please put your money here, because then they would say they wanted the restaurants and things, but it doesn't show up on the data to justify it to the people that are trying to sell Kingman for the restaurants and so on. So they're always, we hear that everywhere, even in, Central Phoenix, it's the constant, we want this restaurant. I'm like, well, you don't have the demographic for it yet. So it's everywhere has the same thing. But yeah, expanding, annexing, you guys are growing. You have so much opportunities here. It's kind of weird. I don't know how everybody feels on other jurisdictions that always see the same thing. You guys seem to recognize it, but sometimes the public doesn't recognize all the opportunities the city has. As I come in from the outside and I see it, I'm like, oh, that's great there. That's right there. There's so much opportunities. There's lots of things that can go right here. And it's just about taking those steps. And sometimes the people, who are in a thick of it can't see it for themselves. So I just want to commend you guys, and hopefully you guys take the opportunities and do the implementation measures to get to those next steps.
Mayor Watkins.
On the subject of annexation, it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because when you annex, then you take over all that cost.
Yes.
And it's simply not feasible in a lot of areas.
And it becomes an issue with wastewater and sewer, and you don't know sometimes what their as-built are. You don't know what you're taking in. And that happened, I know, in Pinal County and stuff like that. That has an issue because they weren't sure what they were annexing, and they found out really quickly.
Yeah, when you annex and you accept all that cost, and I don't think that the people that are really pushing for annexation understand the cost to the city.
Well, yeah, and it has to make fiscal responsibility to the city, and that's in the general plan. We actually talk about just making smart decisions about annexing, because you don't want to. I've seen cities de-annex because they didn't take that step of recognizing the financial impacts of it. So,
Mayor Watkins, Councilmember Eric has a question.
Oh, Yes, Counselor, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make a quick comment that, like Bennett with Retail 360, his measurements are all based on Kingman limits plus 20 miles. And I think a lot of services are starting to kind of get the idea that it's more than just city limits. And I just wanted to kind of point that out when someone mentioned it was the city limits and the city population that affects businesses. I think the service that Bennett was utilizing took into mind that it services 20 plus miles around the surrounding city limits.
Yep, it should.
Okay, thank you, Counselor. Vice Mayor?
I was just going to Councilor Ward's comment about annexation. I know that the council is being very proactive in looking and identifying areas pre-development that we can annex in prior to development happening. So we're looking to identify those areas as well to hopefully get ahead of the curve. But I mean, I concur with Councilor Ward. It's got to make fiscal sense because we don't want to do that to our city and then get ourselves, you know, in a position where it was the wrong decision. So, and to Councilor Eric's point, that service area is becoming something that retail industry is looking at. We have a huge service area, so you know, we greater population outside of our city limits and an even greater service area. So I think that the word is getting out, and they're taking a look at that, not just the hard numbers of our population.
Yeah, we mentioned that in the economic development chapter about it's a regional approach because you are pulling from so many other areas. It's not just here, and to capitalize on that when you're looking for businesses and employment industries and things like that.
Well, and to that point, not only, you know, just the residents that are living here, but the pass-through traffic, the counts on I-40 and the opportunity that's there to pull that traffic off of, you know, our interstate system is a huge opportunity for businesses as well, so.
Jessica and Sean, can you remind us all about where you can find this survey? I think it's important to bring that out too, because we need to encourage everyone that we know to participate.
Yes, so the survey is, so there's multiple surveys. Like Jessica said before, the surveys are created in there by chapter. So if you have comment or interest in one specific chapter, you can take the survey for that chapter. Those are located on our website. There is a specific page for the Kingman General Plan 2040. That's the same location that you can find the current draft of the general plan as well.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Jessica or Sean? As we're talking about all this? Yes, Counselor. Commissioner.
Sure, yeah. We had one slide up there where it was different suggestions for you know, like type of developments, and one was like parks, just generic things. I know in Lake Havasu they have like an equestrian community where they have like you know, like boarding or stables centralized, and then there'll be like a subdivision built around it. I know if we do approach the developers and have some sort of dialogue for more variety in these cookie cutter type subdivisions, maybe that's something we could push. Because I know people talk about the Kingman lifestyle. You know, a lot of times there's like a horse component to it. Like if we had more of those type of little communities in town, that might be something to push.
Yeah, and then also there's, not recently, but the state has also changed the requirements on, like when you have master plans and they build a park or something like that, on the amount of funding per acreage that will come back if the city decides to take it over, how much the developer can get reimbursed. So previously, a long time ago, I believe it was 40 acres, and I think it's been reduced to like 20. Yeah, so there's different things like that when people come in and you're like, okay, the developer, you know, you can ask them like, your master plan, you pay for this, but we will take it over. And so there's ways to just incentivize people. And then when they're coming through, you can ask for different things like horse trails or stables. You don't ever want to have public, I mean, some cities do it, but it's an insurance issue. Like you don't want to have stables or, round pens and things like that, because then that's just a nightmare with insurance. But horse trails, things like that, that's great. Easily adapted to any project, really. And so there's different opportunities for public-private partnerships, and then maybe the city can take something over if it works out, or just, like I mentioned with GPAC sometime, the committee, one of the really good ones I really like that was proposed, I believe, in Tucson, was there was an industrial park that was built, and then they had this huge parking area, and it was next to kind of like a wash or some other areas, and then they just built an amphitheater and regional park next to that parking area. So when the industrial is not using it on the weekends, you already have your parking set for the park. And so therefore, the city doesn't have to maintain or pay for that parking area. So it's just a way of negotiating and figuring out, being creative. It's really is just about being creative and having the flexibility to do what you need to do to make it work for you, so that you guys can still sustain and maintain without going upside down.
I've heard that the city is pretty stretched thin, in terms of their parks, and HOAs is like a potential way of paying for it.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the city could help by, if you've gone to Pawnee Park across town, they have a large retention basin, which I make use of all the time. I see all these people throwing footballs there and everything else. There's a big pushback from the engineers that develop these subdivisions, that plan them out, that plat them out, to make the retention basins as small as possible but deep. And after a certain depth, they need to put a wall around them, to prevent people falling in or whatever. It's never going to be useful that way. They'll fill them with big boulders or whatever. The big wide ones like at Pawnee Park, if the city could try and embrace that and maybe pay for it with HOAs or something, like maybe that would be a solution. But again, it would take cajoling the developers to do something like that. Along those same lines, we always, whenever we approve some sort of subdivision on the Planning and Zoning Commission, we always ask, where's the nearest park, that type of thing. And so many times, it's not clear to me if there is actually a sidewalk that leads to that said park, And maybe we can make the developers pony up for, a park, a sidewalk improvement all the way to the park, because, Wallach Ranch, I try and go from one park to another with my kid. There's no sidewalk for a good portion of it, maybe on purpose to keep other people out or something. But that would be a way for the city to get some money and help the residents, somebody in a wheelchair or something, actually get to a park nearby. So I know this is high level stuff, but if we could try and get the developers to cooperate, that seems to be the thesis of what I'm saying here. If you could turn their arms through this document you're drafting, that would be good.
Yeah, and so a lot of that has to do with code changes, because a lot of those requirements are in the code. And so with parks and stuff, whether it's the national code or something, there's requirements for retention, like how much has to be, and that would be a code comment, because then you could adjust the code in terms of, and that would have to be obviously a unified decision of how much of the open space has to be free and clear of being in the flood, is it usable? So you can have your basin, but they don't consider it as active open space until it's above the 100-year flood. So different things like that. So when it changes retention requirements, so those have to do with code changes, which could be implemented when they're saying, hey, the general plan really wants to update the building requirements for sidewalks, for parks, for how they're implemented, percentage open space versus active versus passive requirements, how much of a retention basin will be calculated towards open space, if any. Because those are all things that when you do entitlements, and when you get to the site design, that's the nitty-gritty stuff that really, it does change the entire development, but it has to do with code, what's building code, ADA requirements, all that stuff. So we can definitely push that for those to be updated.
Yeah, I'll share mine.
Quick on that. Get a mic.
So a lot of homes are being built in developments that are aimed towards seniors, and that, they don't really care about parks as much. But on the resale side, I really wanted to kind of emphasize my agreement with this, because with the HOA backing or something, where those parks will help with the resale of those homes once the current residents pass or move away. People that are going to end up filling those houses in the long run are going to want some sort of green space around them. So
it might be an easier sell, but once they get parks around them.
Any other comments or questions for Jessica? And as you notice, she is writing these comments down, so I appreciate that, Jessica, to add to this.
New implementation measures.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to finish up with, or is?
Anything the attorney says I did wrong yet? So I'll just, that's the big question always, so, okay. He'll say it later, I'm sure.
Okay.
Thank you, guys. And if you haven't taken the surveys, please do. I don't know how much they'll skew, but it'd be nice to get a bigger number to, and anybody else in your families and friends. Because we do want to make those reports public so people, because I know sometimes they wonder what ever happens to those surveys, so they can at least see what the results are.
We've always heard the comment is that you shouldn't be able to complain if you're not going to participate, and that's, we need to encourage people to go on the city website and participate in the different sections of this survey. I did want to recognize Mr. Waters. You came in just after we got everybody introduced, and of course, Councilor Eric, I'm glad you're here too, and just recognize that you're present. So if there's no other comments or questions for Jessica, I suggest that we adjourn. Okay, we are adjourned.
Thank you.